Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah, glad to be here.
You're here today because, well, you are ready to graduate. We are looking at a massive stack of operator manuals, field notes, and advanced playbooks.
The real stuff.
Exactly. The stuff that outlines exactly how the most sophisticated, devastating breaches of the last decade actually happened. We're talking about the shift from finding isolated, low-hanging fruit to executing total organizational compromise.
And just for some context on why we even have this material, we've spent a significant portion of our careers operating heavily in the shadows.
Yeah, we did.
We started on the outside, basically breaking into enterprise networks simply because we could. We were finding the microscopic cracks in the armor that corporate security teams swore up and down didn't exist.
Right.
Eventually, those skills get noticed. We transitioned into building nation-state level capabilities, specifically working alongside government units and executing highly classified private contracts.
Yeah, we essentially went from black hats causing absolute chaos for the fun of it to the guys they call when they need to prove that a multi-billion-dollar zero-trust architecture is actually made of Swiss cheese.
Which is usually exactly what it is.
Always.
Yeah.
And that is the exact mission of this deep dive training course. We are taking you, whether you're a standard bug bounty hunter, a penetration tester, or just an insanely curious technical mind, and evolving you into an elite red team operator.
We want you to stop wasting your time running basic vulnerability scanners.
Right, hoping for a quick $500 payout. We are going to teach you how to assemble complex, multi-vector kill chains, the kind of chains that lead to zero-day level payouts and leave a target company's board of directors sweating through their damn suits.
It requires a fundamental shift in your entire technical mindset. A typical penetration tester looks for a vulnerability, right? An elite operator looks for a path.
A completely different philosophy.
Exactly. Today's curriculum will take you through the complete life cycle of an advanced operation. We begin with initial reconnaissance, focusing on assets the company doesn't even know it has. Then, we move into breaking the underlying assumptions of their APIs and mobile backends.
From there, we move into the art of the invisible footprint, command and control. After that, we dive into post-exploitation and lateral movement. And finally, exfiltration and cleanup, where you extract the crown jewels and vanish without a single forensic artifact hitting the disk.
No skip steps. No basic, sanitized, out-of-the-box tutorials.
Just the raw, highly technical reality of how modern enterprises are dismantled piece by piece. Let's get right into it. So when we talk about reconnaissance at an elite level, you need to completely reset your baseline.
You really do.
If your idea of recon is firing up Subfinder, waiting 5 minutes for your terminal to spit out some DNS records, and port scanning whatever comes back, you are playing in the minor leagues.
Yeah, that's what everybody else is doing.
Right. The core concept here is breadth plus depth. Stopping at simple DNS subdomains is an amateur move, because literally every other bug hunter on the planet is looking at the exact same public-facing assets.
The modern corporate perimeter is no longer a fortress wall with a single gate. It is a sprawling, decentralized, chaotic mess of third-party vendors, forgotten cloud storage, and shadow IT.
It's a nightmare for defenders.
To find the vulnerabilities that actually lead to total compromise, you have to look where the security team isn't looking. And that means mapping autonomous system numbers, or ASNs.
Wait, back up for a second. For anyone who hasn't dug into the actual routing backbone of the internet recently, what exactly is an ASN, and why do we care about it from an attack perspective?
Good question. Think of the internet as a massive global postal system. An autonomous system number is essentially a unique zip code assigned to a large organization.
Okay.
Major corporations, banks, tech giants, telecom providers, they don't just rent a few IP addresses from AWS. They buy massive blocks of contiguous IP space, sometimes tens of thousands of IPs at once. This block is their ASN. They use the Border Gateway Protocol, or BGP, to announce to the rest of the internet, hey, if you want to reach any IP in this massive block, route the traffic to us.
Okay, so they own a massive chunk of digital real estate. How does that actually help us break in?
Because companies are incredibly disorganized, they own these massive IP blocks, but many of the servers sitting on those IPs do not resolve to any public domain name like dev.company.com.
Oh, so they just don't have a DNS record at all.
Exactly. They are completely invisible to standard DNS enumeration. By using a tool like Amassed Intel, Avon, combined with BGP routing tables, you query the Internet's core routing infrastructure to hand over every single IP address that organization legally owns.
And here's where it gets really lucrative. You don't just look at their current ASNs, you track their historical ASNs.
Yes.
Because companies migrate their infrastructure to the cloud all the time, right? But they almost always forget to decommission the legacy metal servers sitting on their old forgotten IP ranges.
It happens constantly.
Those servers haven't been patched since, 2018? But they often still have active VPN tunnels or trust relationships piped directly into the new core network.
And moving from legacy hardware to the cloud, we have to talk about cloud asset hunting. Corporate cloud hygiene is, frankly, abysmal.
It's so bad.
You have developers spinning up AWS S3 buckets or Azure blobs constantly just to test a new feature, and they invariably leave the permissions wide open. You use tools like CloudNum and S3 Scanner to automate the hunting of these endpoints.
But I see a lot of guys just searching for the company name and the word prod, like company-prod-assets.s3.amazonoz.com. That usually just hosts marketing images, right?
Which is exactly why you alter your permutations.
Yeah.
You don't look for prod. You look for the staging, UAT-dev, and backup buckets.
Yeah.
That is where developers get sloppy.
Right.
That is where they accidentally upload their .env files, their hard-coded API keys, and entire uncompiled repositories of proprietary source code.
Let's talk about the Internet's memory for a minute. Historical reconnaissance. The IT department forgets, but the Internet never does. I'm talking about tools like the Get All URLs tool and Wayback Girls. You are essentially performing digital dumpster diving.
Mechanically, what these tools do is query the Wayback Machine, Alien Vault's Open Thread Exchange, and Common Crawl databases. They pull down every single HTTP request ever archived for that target domain.
You are not looking for old marketing pages.
No, you're looking for dead API endpoints and archived query parameters.
Right, because if you find an archived URL from 3 years ago that looks like api.company.com/v1users.debugtrue or .editor-id1, that is pure gold.
Pure gold.
Even if they updated the front-end web app to completely remove that hidden admin panel, the back-end API routing logic on the server might still absolutely accept that parameter if you replay it today.
Human intelligence and OSINT are equally critical here. You scrape LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You aren't just looking at who works there. You're looking at the organizational structure and the exact naming conventions of the engineering team.
Give me an example.
Once you know their names, say John Smith and Jane Doe, you map their email formats. John J. Smith, thecompany.com.
And then you weaponize that against their personal lives. You take those names and cross-reference them with GitHub.
Exactly.
You fire up tools like GitDorker and TruffleHog to hunt through their public, personal repositories. Why? Because developers are fundamentally lazy.
They really are.
They will fork a highly sensitive corporate repository over to their personal GitHub account so they can work on it from home over the weekend. And in doing so, they accidentally commit a personal access token, or P, or worse, a set of production database credentials right into the public commit history.
Now, to execute this Recon methodology properly, we need to dive into the technical mechanics. Elite operators utilize an automated API and mobile Recon pipeline. They do not just intercept web traffic in a browser.
No, that's too surface level.
They download the target company's mobile applications directly. The APK files for Android, the IPA files for iOS.
Hold up, for anyone who hasn't dug into the guts of an Android phone recently, what exactly are we looking at when you say we pull apart an APK? It's not just a standard zip file, right?
It is essentially a compressed archive, but the code inside is compiled. When developers write an Android app in Java or Kotlin, it gets compiled down into Dalvik bytecode so the phone's processor can efficiently execute it.
Right.
To read it, we use reverse engineering tools like JADX. JADX takes that unreadable Dalvik bytecode and decompiles it back into readable human-facing Java code. We also use AppTool to untack the XML manifest files.
And what are we actually looking for when we are staring at hundreds of decompiled Java files? It's a lot of noise.
We're looking for hard-coded base URL strings pointing to undocumented staging APIs. We're looking for buried GraphQL schemas. We're looking for feature flags.
Oh, feature flags are huge.
Massive. They are Booleans in the code that dictate how the application behaves.
Yeah.
A developer might write a feature flag like isAdminModable is false. If you intercept the mobile traffic and flip that flag to true in the response, you suddenly unlock administrator UI components on your mobile device that shouldn't be accessible at all.
Mobile apps are essentially a highly detailed roadmap of the backend API, wrapped in a neat little package and handed directly to the attacker.
They really are.
But doing all of this generates a massive amount of data. You can't just drop thousands of subdomains, IPs, and endpoints into a text file on your desktop and expect to track it.
No, absolutely not. You build a continuous data lake, you stand up an Elasticsearch cluster or a heavily structured SQL database, you feed every single piece of Recon data into this lake, and you script it to run daily diffs.
Diffs.
You compare what the perimeter looked like yesterday to what it looks like today.
Right, because you want a Slack alert pinging your phone the exact second some junior developer spins up a new, undocumented staging portal at 2.0 OM on a Friday.
Precisely. If we formalize this concept, we have to look at how the attack surface actually expands. It is not linear, it is compounding. In mathematical notation, it looks like this. Attack surface summi1, ASNI plus CTLogC plus CloudBucketC plus JS endpoint C.
Okay, translate the math for me. What does that actually mean for the operator sitting at the keyboard?
It is a cumulative sum of exposure. Every new ASN UMAP expands the potential for discovering new certificate transparency, or CT logs.
Okay.
Those new certificates reveal hidden subdomains pointing to undocumented cloud buckets. Those buckets contain unminified JavaScript files, and reading those JavaScript files reveals brand new, unauthenticated API endpoints.
It just snowballs.
Every single layer you peel back exponentially multiplies the surface area of the target.
Let me set the stage with a war story to show you exactly why this breadth plus depth approach is so devastating. Think back to how Uber got hit in 2022, or the massive Capital One fallout a few years prior.
Good examples.
It wasn't some impossibly complex zero-day super weapon. It was a failure of basic asset management.
We were on an engagement targeting a massive fintech company, real Wall Street money. On paper, their perimeter was an absolute fortress. Next-gen web application firewalls, top-tier endpoint detection and response agents, a massive SOC team.
But we didn't attack the fortress. Through OSINT and automated GitHub scraping, we found the personal repository of a junior dev. This lazy-ass developer had created a public fork of a legacy internal database management tool.
Unbelievable.
And sitting right there, buried 3 years deep in the commit history, was an old .env file.
The compounding attack surface in action.
Exactly. That .env file contained AWS access keys. Now, they weren't root keys. They didn't have full admin rights to the cloud environment, but they did have read access to a forgotten, misconfigured staging S3 bucket.
And what was in the bucket?
We use the keys to dump the bucket, and we find a raw, unencrypted backup of an API gateway configuration file from 2019. And hardwired into that legacy config file was a high-privilege bearer token that authenticated directly to their production customer database.
Game over.
Yeah. They had spent tens of millions of dollars fortifying the front door, and we walked right past it because a developer wanted to work from home on a Sunday, and the IT team didn't track their legacy cloud storage. It was a catastrophic failure of corporate security posture.
Which perfectly illustrates the elite edge here. A typical bug bounty hunter runs a script for 5 minutes, stares at the terminal, finds nothing obvious, and moves on to the next target.
Right.
A nation-state level operator or an elite red teamer builds automated daily diffing pipelines. They're not looking for what is vulnerable today. They're waiting in the shadows for the exact moment a developer makes a mistake tomorrow. They map the organization better than the organization's own CIFOSO.
All right, moving into the next stage. Advanced vulnerability and exploitation. The lockpick. So you've mapped the entire surface area. You have thousands of endpoints sitting in your data lake.
You got the map?
Now, we transition from merely observing the surface to actively breaking the server's underlying assumptions. We are stepping completely away from traditional noisy web vulnerabilities like cross-site scripting and moving directly into the heavy hitters, APIs, mobile endpoints, and IoT devices.
The foundational concept in modern API exploitation is understanding broken object level authorization, commonly known as BOLA or IDOR.
Yeah, IDOR is everywhere.
It occurs when an API exposes a direct reference to an internal object, like a database row or a document, and the server fails to verify if the user requesting that object actually has the cryptographic authority to access it.
It sounds incredibly simple. You capture a valid HTTP request in your proxy, look at the JSON payload, and see a parameter like user_aid 4552.
Right.
You just swap that 4552 with your target's ID, say 4553, and forward it to the server. If the server hands you back their private data, you've just breached the tenant boundary.
You would be astounded by how often this basic architectural flaw exists. especially on back-end microservices that blindly assume the front-end API gateway already handled all the authorization checks.
They just trust the internal network too much.
Always. But let's escalate this to mass assignment. This is where your deep, exhaustive recon pays massive dividends.
Walk me through the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
I've got a mobile application decompiled. I find an open API document or maybe a mobile data transfer object, a DTO, that defines all the variables for a user profile in the database.
Okay.
The app's user interface only lets me update my first name, last name, and email address.
Exactly. But the back-end documentation you extracted reveals hidden fields. You see variables like role, account balance, or is superadmin. You take those hidden fields, craft a custom JSON payload, inject those variables into a PAD-CH or PuTTY request, and fire it at the server.
And if the backend developer used a lazy object relational map framework that automatically binds incoming JSON key value pairs directly to the database object without an explicit allow list, boom, you just overwrote your own user role and promoted yourself to global admin.
We also must address IoT and thick client exploitation. Thick clients install desktop applications or smart device firmware, are essentially just API front-ends in disguise, but with a drastically expanded attack surface.
How do you even get into the firmware, though?
By utilizing a tool like Binwalk, you can literally carve the file system out of an IoT device's binary firmware update file. You just download the update from the vendor's website and rip it apart.
Inside that extracted Linux file system, you are hunting for hard-coded cryptographic keys, undocumented debugging API routes, and MQTT broker addresses.
MQTT is a goldmine.
It is a super lightweight messaging protocol used heavily in IoT environments. If you find the IP address and credentials for their MQTT broker, you can connect to it and subscribe to wildcard topics using a simple hashtag symbol.
Just a single hash symbol.
Yep. Suddenly, you are silently reading the real-time telemetry data of every single customer device on the network.
Alternatively, you manipulate the logic of the device registration process. If you find the register endpoint and manipulate the hardware serial number in the request, you can spoof device telemetry, effectively registering rogue ghost devices directly onto the target's internal network infrastructure.
Let's unpack the technical deep dive for this stage. We need to talk about GraphQL overfetching and the dangerous protocol drift between REST and gRPC architectures. GraphQL is a massive playground right now because developers constantly leave a feature called introspection enabled in production.
Introspection is an administrative feature. If it is enabled, you can send a specific query to the GraphQL server, and it will respond by handing you its entire structural schema.
It tells you everything.
It outlines every single query, every mutation, every backend data type, and every relationship it supports. It is the equivalent of walking into a highly secure facility and having the security guard hand you the complete architectural blueprints.
Once you have those blueprints, you start exploiting deeply nested queries. But wait, wouldn't a modern web application firewall catch a massive nested GraphQL query instantly? Or wouldn't the server just rate limit you?
You would think so, but that is where the technique of alias abuse comes into play. If an API rate limits you based on the volume of incoming HTTP requests, say 10 requests per second, you use GraphQL aliases to pack 50 entirely different queries into a single HTTP POST request.
Oh, that's clever.
You bypass the network layer rate lat entirely while forcing the backend database to process massive resource-exhausting amounts of data.
And what about this REST versus gRPC drift? I see a lot of modern apps using both.
That is precisely where the vulnerability lies. Modern applications often utilize a standard REST API gateway on the public front end. This gateway takes your standard JSON request, validates it, and then translates it into gRPC, which is a high-performance binary remote procedure call framework developed by Google to communicate with the internal microservices.
So the front end speaks JSON, the back end speaks binary. Where's the crack in the armor?
The authorization gap. The public API gateway might heavily sanitize, authenticate, and rate limit the incoming REST JSON payloads. But if your reconnaissance uncovers a direct, exposed gRPC endpoint, you can bypass the gateway entirely.
Just skip the bouncer.
Exactly. If you send raw, native gRPC frames directly to the microservice, the backend logic often blindly trusts the request, operating under the flawed assumption that the gateway already verified it.
Let's look at the actual mathematical logic of a mass assignment payload to solidify this.
If you were to write this out as a mathematical formula, a set theory logic model, it looks like this. Payload-based quest, text admin, text credits.
9999999. But in plain English, for the operator building the payload in Burp Suite.
You are taking the legitimate base data payload that the server expects your name and email, and you are taking your malicious, injected hidden fields. The cup symbol represents the union of these two sets.
You are literally stapling your own admin rules to the side of the legitimate data.
Yes. If the server-side logic applies the union of these sets directly to the database row without filtering, the exploitation is mathematically guaranteed.
Time for a war story to illustrate the why. This is heavily inspired by the highly successful tactics used by state-sponsored actors like APT-10 when they were breaching government networks. We were on a black box engagement for a massive global logistics firm, highly secured corporate workstations, aggressively segmented network architecture.
We couldn't get a foothold anywhere.
But during our physical and wireless recon, we found a printer sitting on the unauthenticated guest Wi-Fi in the corporate lobby. Just a standard, shitty lobby printer.
A classic, often overlooked entry point. But a printer is an edge device. How exactly do you pivot from a lobby printer into a segmented internal network?
We run a port scan on it, find the web-based management interface, and tried the default manufacturer credentials. Admin and password, boom, we're in.
Of course they didn't change it.
Never. We extract the internal configuration file from the printer's firmware. It turns out the IT department had configured this exact printer to automatically scan documents and send them to a secure internal file share.
And to authenticate to that internal share.
Exactly. The printer was hard-coded with a highly privileged internal Active Directory service account. We ripped those credentials completely out of the firmware, logged into the corporate VPN from the outside using those exact credentials, and rode that tunnel straight into the corporate LAN.
Oh, brilliant.
We turned a medium-severity misconfiguration on an ignored edge device into a critical, full-scale enterprise breach, completely owning their ass because they inherently trusted a peripheral device.
This highlights the elite edge perfectly. Standard bug bounty hunters pop a single IDOR on a web app, report it, collect a few $1,000s, and move on. NSA-level operators do not stop there. They map the entire state machine of the application. They aren't just looking for a single bug. They're looking for architectural design drift across dozens of interconnected microservices. They want to completely unravel the zero-trust architecture by proving that the central server fundamentally trusts data it shouldn't.
All right, now that we've picked the lock, bypassed the perimeter, and we are sitting inside the network, we have to talk about survival. Welcome to the stage of command and control and evasion, the invisible man.
Fun part.
Let me be clear. If you are still dropping raw, noisy Metasploit reverse shells onto enterprise endpoints, you are going to get caught by any modern security operations center in roughly 5 seconds.
Command and control, or C2, is the beating heart of a professional operation. It dictates exactly how you communicate with your compromised hosts, how you exfiltrate stolen data, and how you maintain persistent access over months or years.
You have to upgrade your toolkit.
We are talking about abandoning outdated tools and moving to advanced modular frameworks. Tools like Sliver, which is written entirely in Go and offers incredible cross-platform stealth across Windows, Linux, and macOS, and Mythic, which is highly modular and allows you to custom build your deployment profiles.
But the architecture of your C2 infrastructure is paramount. You absolutely do not have your implants call back directly to your primary server.
Never.
Because the second the blue team catches that IP address, they block it and your entire operation burns to the ground.
Exactly. You utilize stagers. A stager is a microscopic, memory-only payload. Its only job is to quietly reach out to the internet, download the much larger, heavily encrypted stageless payload, execute it in memory, and then terminate itself. And critically, you hide all of this behind redirectors.
Pretend I'm a junior SOC analyst looking at the network traffic. What am I actually seeing when a redirector is in play?
You aren't seeing the attacker's server. We spin up cheap, disposable virtual private servers VPS instances running reverse proxies like NGINX or a proxy. The compromised host on your network talks exclusively to the redirector.
Okay.
The redirector then blindly forwards that encrypted traffic to our heavily fortified hidden C2 server. And we tear down and rotate those VPS redirectors every 72 hours. So even if your threat intelligence feeds flag the IP, by the time you block it, we have already moved our infrastructure.
Let's delve into network-level evasion. To avoid detection, you must blend into the noise. You use domain fronting.
Essential technique.
You route your C2 traffic through a highly trusted content delivery network like AWS CloudFront or Fastly. To the defending network firewall, your malicious traffic looks exactly like a standard encrypted request to a generic, globally trusted CDN. They can't block it without blocking half the internet.
Furthermore, you absolutely cannot use aggressive, predictable beaconing. If your malware checks in with a C2 server exactly every 10 seconds, a SIM, a security information and event management system, will flag that rhythmic, metronomic pattern instantly. You must use HTTP or HTTPS beaconing with randomized jitter.
So let's get into the technical deep dive of how this is actually achieved on the wire. Covert sauce channels and memory evasion. This is where it gets incredibly sophisticated. You don't just encrypt your traffic, you profile your C2 traffic to look exactly like the legitimate corporate traffic already flowing through the network.
If you do your recon and discover the target company mandates the use of Google Chrome and Microsoft Teams, you configure your sliver or MISIC C2 profiles to use the exact user agent strings, HTTP headers, TLS fingerprint hashes, and packet sizes of Chrome and Teams.
You literally wear their uniform.
The firewall inspects the packet and says this is just another Teams video call.
And regarding host-level evasion, you must operate entirely in memory. Touching the physical hard drive is a cardinal sin in modern red teaming. The moment an unverified .exe hits the disk, the EDR agent kills it. So we use reflective DLL injection.
Reflective DLL injection is like performing surgery without leaving a scar. It is a technique that allows us to load a compiled dynamic link library from memory directly into the execution space of a completely legitimate already running process like explorer.exe or notepad.exe. It completely bypasses the disk.
To get past antivirus and next-gen EDR solutions, we utilize LOL bins living off the land binaries. These are native Windows executables that come pre-installed with the OS.
Tools like Sertil, Rundle32, or Rensbuild.
Because they are digitally signed by Microsoft and native to the operating system, executing scripts or downloading payloads through them often completely bypasses behavioral detection algorithms. They inherently trust Microsoft binaries.
You also must actively employ PowerShell AMSI bypasses. The anti-malware scan interface is designed to inspect your scripts in memory before they execute. By dynamically patching the AMSI initialization function in memory, we essentially blind the EDR, allowing us to run raw, malicious PowerShell without triggering a single alert.
Explain the jitter math we talked about earlier. How do we mathematically ensure the SIEM doesn't catch our beaconing rhythm?
To avoid SIEM detection based on time series analysis, the beacon interval is calculated dynamically using a randomized jitter algorithm. The formula looks like this: 2 to the beacon T-base plus T-base times tax jitter March day.
Break that down for me. If my implant is set to check in every 60 seconds, what does this actually do?
You take your base time of 60 seconds and you apply, say, a 20% jitter. The implant mathematically calculates a random multiplier between -1 and +1 for every single request.
Okay, so it changes every time.
So instead of checking in every 60 seconds, the first check-in is at 48 seconds, the next is at 71 seconds, the next is at 55 seconds. It completely destroys any identifiable algorithmic rhythm in the firewall logs. It looks like random organic human web browsing.
Time for the Wild War story. We were embedded in a massive long-term red team engagement against a global media conglomerate. Their internal blue team was actually highly competent.
They were aggressive.
They were aggressively hunting for newly registered malicious domains and abnormal DNS queries. So we didn't use our own domains at all. We wrote a custom Python C2 implant that utilized the target company's own sanctioned SaaS applications.
Using their own paid infrastructure directly against them.
Exactly.
Right.
We configured the Python implant to authenticate to their corporate Dropbox API using a stolen token, and we hooked it into a hidden channel in their own corporate Slack workspace for exfiltration and command execution.
It's beautiful.
The implant would literally sit there and read a specific Slack channel for encrypted text messages, decrypt the instructions, execute the commands in memory, and then upload the results as a text file into a shared Dropbox folder.
And the SOC completely missed it.
They didn't see a damn thing. Why? Because our traffic blended perfectly with the thousands of legitimate Slack messages and Dropbox file syncs happening across their network every single second.
It's impossible to filter.
It was sneaky as hell. I mean, the blue team was spending all their time looking for known malware domains and sketchy IP addresses, not investigating traffic going to their own damn Slack channels.
This is the essence of the Elite Edge. A standard pen tester uses an out-of-the-box, cracked version of Cobalt Strike with default, malleable profiles, and they get caught, quarantined, and kicked out by CrowdStrike in 10 minutes.
Yep.
A nation-state operator uses multi-country redirector chains, custom-tailored SOS-fronted APIs, and strict memory-only execution.
Yeah.
If the blue team somehow manages to detect and burn one redirector node, the core C2 infrastructure remains completely untouched.
The implant just rolls over to the next redirector.
Exactly. In the elite realm, survival is not measured in hours or days. It is measured in months and years.
Okay, we are hidden, our beacons are jittered, and we have a solid foothold on a single workstation. Now we enter the stage of post-exploitation and lateral movement, the insider.
An expansion phase.
This is where you expand from a single compromised host or a single stolen token into complete, terrifying organizational dominance.
The core concept here is that initial access is merely the beginning of the operation. You must move laterally to find the data that matters. Let's start with traditional Active Directory environments. The gold standard for lateral movement here involves techniques like Kerberoasting.
Active Directory ticketing can be confusing. Explain Kerberoasting simply. Think of it like a theme park.
Good analogy.
Yeah.
In Active Directory, Kerberos is the ticketing system. When you want to access a service, you don't show your password. You request a ticket from the central authority. With Kerberoasting, any authenticated user can request a service ticket for specific accounts that have service principal names or SPNs, usually high-privileged service accounts. The central authority hands you the ticket, which is encrypted with that service account's password hash.
And because you are doing this offline, the target network has no idea what you're doing with that ticket.
Correct. You extract those encrypted hashes from memory, pull them down to your own high-powered cracking rig, and run them through Hashcat to brute force the plaintext password offline. We also actively look for ASREP roasting.
Which is even better.
Way better. This targets accounts that have been misconfigured to not require Kerberos pre-authentication, allowing us to request the encrypted ticket without even needing a valid user password to start with.
And of course, there is pass the hash and pass the ticket. This is where you use Mimikatz or a similar tool to extract raw authentication tokens directly from the Windows LSASS memory process.
Just rip them right out of memory.
You inject those tokens directly into your own session. You literally impersonate the domain administrator without ever needing to know what their actual password is.
But Active Directory is just the old school on-prem stuff. We have to talk about cloud lateral movement. If your initial payload lands on an AWS EC2 instance, the very first thing you do is query the local metadata service.
Yep, 169.254.169.254.
You pull down the temporary IAM role credentials assigned to that machine. Then you look for a specific permission, assume a role. This allows you to mathematically trade your current access token for a new token that belongs to a different role, allowing you to pivot aggressively across different segregated AWS accounts.
In Azure, it's a similar concept but different execution. You exploit Azure Graph API token scopes to pivot across different corporate tenants, moving from a compromised user account into the core administrative backend.
And perhaps the most devastating modern technique, SOS daisy chaining. Modern enterprises are heavily deeply integrated. If you compromise a valid token for one platform, you can almost always use it to bridge the gap and jump to another.
Slack integrates natively with Jira.
Jira integrates directly with GitHub.
GitHub integrates seamlessly with AWS. It's a chain.
Let's get into the technical deep dive of the SOS kill chain and graph theory. Because at an elite level, we don't just guess where to go, we map it mathematically. Let's walk through a realistic chain. Say your Recon uncovers a Slackbot token in a public repository. They always start with the prefix OXB.
You take that token and use the Slack API to silently join and read private IT support channels. Why? Because IT support engineers are notoriously overworked and constantly paste raw Jira credentials, password reset links, or active session cookies directly into the chat for convenience.
So you scrape the chat, extract those credentials, and you log into Jira. Now you are in the project management software. You search the internal tickets for documentation regarding back-end engineering projects.
Right.
Those tickets almost inevitably contain links to internal private GitHub repositories. You use the Jira access to find a GitHub personal access token.
You log into the source code repository, and what are you hunting for? CI/CD pipelines, continuous integration, continuous deployment setups. You are looking for GitHub Actions workflow files or Jenkins configurations.
The keys to the kingdom.
These automated deployment pipelines require highly privileged static AWS IAM keys to push code into production. You extract those master secrets from the source code, and you have instantly achieved total cloud dominance.
And for the on-premise side, to map the physical network, you use Bloodhound. You feed it all the Active Directory data you've scraped, every user, every group, every active session.
I love Bloodhound.
It's amazing. Bloodhound uses graph theory to visually map out the absolute shortest, most efficient attack path from the random receptionist's workstation you initially compromised, straight to domain admin.
We can formalize this lateral movement graph mathematically using set theory and graph theory, text $, text catchers, text DRS $,
So just like Madden's.
text where, dex $, text gira, text stolen token.
Translate the graph formula. What are we looking at?
The vertices, represented by V, are the disparate SaaS and cloud platforms, the islands of data. The edges, represented by E, connecting them, are the stolen tokens, the SSH keys, and the credentials.
Okay.
Your objective as an operator is to traverse the graph from the lowest privilege vertex to the highest by continuously discovering new edges. You are drawing a line of compromise across their entire corporate infrastructure.
Time for another war story. We were doing a full-scope red team operational assessment for a massive retail brand. They had their cloud infrastructure locked down incredibly tight, EDR on every server, strict network segmentation.
Well, we found a crack.
During our recon, we found a leaked Slack webhook in a public GitHub repository. Just a simple, seemingly harmless webhook URL.
A classic foothold, but webhooks usually only let you post messages, not read them. How did you pivot?
We used the webhook to inject highly formatted messages directly into a private developer channel. We crafted a message that looked exactly like an automated IT alert, socially engineering a junior developer into clicking a malicious link that snagged his active session cookie.
Okay, you have a developer session. Where did it lead?
It led to absolute, unmitigated chaos. We used his session cookie to access a segregated development environment. We started poking around the CI/CD pipeline and realized a senior developer had reused his personal, highly privileged SSH key across all the dev environments for convenience.
Oh, man.
A total clusterfuck of credential reuse. We took that SSH key, realized it was also valid for the production environment, pivoted directly into the core production database clusters, and owned the entire global domain before their security team even finished their morning coffee.
The elite edge here is a fundamental difference in operational philosophy. Standard hunters look for vertical privilege escalation. They land on a Linux box and spend 3 days running kernel exploits trying to get root on that single machine.
It's too noisy.
Elite operators think in graphs. They treat the entire enterprise Active Directory, cloud environments, and SaaS platforms as one massive, interconnected hybrid organism. They use native tools, living off the land, to move laterally across these environments without ever dropping a malicious binary that an EDR could flag. They don't exploit the systems themselves. They exploit the implicit trust relationships between the systems. We have reached the endgame stage. Exfiltration and cleanup. The ghost. You have the access, you have the domain admin credentials, you have the master cloud keys.
You basically own the place.
No, you have to extract the value, you have to prove the critical business impact by grabbing PII, PCI data, or proprietary source code while maintaining absolute operational security.
The core concept of this final stage is covert data staging and persistence reinforcement. If you compromise a database, you do not just run a massive SQL dump command and try to download a 500 gigabyte database over an HTTP connection.
That's a great way to get caught immediately.
That massive spike in outbound traffic will instantly trigger every data loss prevention or DLP alarm in the building.
Right, you have to be surgical. Instead of a sledgehammer, you use a scalpel. Covert staging.
Exactly. For example, querying cloud metadata endpoints from a compromised web server. You run a simple curl command like curl http.169.254.169.254 latest metadata data on an AWS instance to silently dump the temporary IAM credentials into memory. You use those credentials to list the S3 buckets via the command line.
But you don't download the whole bucket.
No. You find the specific bucket containing the highly sensitive financial data, and you fetch a single tiny proof of concept file. One credit card ledger file is enough to prove critical business impact without making any network noise.
And before you pack up and leave, you lock the back door wide open so you can come back whenever you want. Persistence reinforcement. You don't just leave a malware beacon running. You drop secondary legitimate credentials.
You create a new AWS IAM user, but you name it something innocuous like SVC Backovigen and hide it deep within a forgotten legacy backup group.
Or, my personal favorite technique for long-term on-premise access, you forge a golden ticket. You use your domain admin access to extract the password hash for the K or BTG account, which is the master key distribution center service account in Active Directory.
The ultimate skeleton key.
Once you possess that hash, you can forge a master Kerberos ticket that grants you instant, unquestioned domain admin access for the next 10 years, even if they change every single user password in the network.
Or, if you are strictly operating in SaaS environments, you just add a malicious hidden webhook to their Slack workspace, allowing you to execute commands via chat messages long after your initial access is revoked.
Let's dive into the technical deep dive of stealth exfiltration and anti-forensics. How exactly do you get the stolen data out of the network without the perimeter firewall noticing the anomaly?
You hide your data exfiltration within native, highly trusted cloud services.
Explain the CloudWatch logs technique. It's brilliant.
If you are operating inside an AWS environment, you can tunnel your exfiltrated data directly out through AWS CloudWatch logs. CloudWatch is designed to ingest massive amounts of diagnostic logging data from EC2 instances.
So the firewall expects to see it.
The corporate firewall sees a constant stream of legitimate AWS metric traffic. But what we do is take the stolen customer database, encode it in base 64, and pipe it out disguised as generic log payloads. We are smuggling the diamonds out inside the security guard's own lunchbox.
Alternatively, you can use DNS tunneling with tools like Iodine. You encode the stolen data into the subdomains of thousands of tiny DNS query requests. Because corporate firewalls rarely block outbound DNS traffic, otherwise the internet stops working, the data flows right past the intrusion detection systems.
And then there is the critical OPSEC cleanup. You must erase your footprints. In Windows environments, you carefully use the clear event log command. Though doing it indiscriminately wiping the entire security log is a massive red flag.
Oh yeah, SOC analysts look for that.
Instead, you surgically delete only the specific event IDs associated with your malicious login sessions.
You also use timestamp stomping on any tools or files you uploaded to the servers. You alter the metadata of the file so it appears to the forensic investigators to have been sitting on the server since 2015, completely bypassing searches for recently modified files.
And in the cloud, you rapidly rotate and delete the temporary IAM rules you used, wiping the CloudTrail audit logs as you go.
Let us model the cryptographic forging of that golden ticket we discussed earlier. It is the ultimate form of long-term stealth in an enterprise environment. The cryptographic model looks like this. TGTT forged eKey RBTGT hash, parallel text domain admin group.
Okay, translate the encryption logic.
You are essentially taking an arbitrary user ID, appending the domain admin group privilege tags to it, defining an arbitrary massive ticket lifetime, say 10 years, and encrypting that entire concatenated string using this stolen key RBTGT hash.
And Active Directory just accepts it.
When you present this forged ticket to the network, Active Directory will inherently mathematically trust it because it's signed by its own ultimate cryptographic authority. It cannot tell the difference between a real ticket and your forged one.
Let's close out with a final war story for the why. We were inside a highly monitored top-tier financial network, Wall Street firm. I'm talking an active 24/7 SOC, aggressive data loss prevention systems, TLS interception on all outbound traffic. The works.
A hard target.
Through our lateral movement, we had mapped a path to a highly segmented database containing raw PCI data, millions of unencrypted credit card numbers. But we knew if we tried to pull that data out via standard HTTP or even DNS tunneling, the volume would trigger a massive incident response.
So how do you bypass a strictly enforced, tightly calibrated DLP system that inspects every single packet?
You don't try to bypass it, you walk right through the front door using their own trusted pipelines. We hijacked an STS ephemeral token, a short-lived, highly trusted cloud credential used by their internal monitoring systems. We used that temporary token to query the database, but we didn't dump it. We extracted just 50 lines of hypersensitive PCI data. We then embedded that credit card data into a JSON payload formatted exactly like a routine system health diagnostic check.
Blending into the noise of the machine.
Exactly. We sent it out through their own authorized whitelisted API monitoring pipeline. The firewall saw a health check and waved it through. We were getting the absolute crown jewels out right under their noses without tripping a single damn wire.
Which brings us to our final elite edge, the fundamental difference in the endgame. A standard bug bounty hunter finds a vulnerability, submits a generic report that says, "I found a token," and hopes the triage team understands why it matters enough to pay out.
An elite red teamer writes a weaponized strategic report.
They map the entire multi-vector kill chain directly to the business risk.
Hmm.
They explicitly detail how the technical vulnerability triggers massive GDPR or high PO compliance violations, proving exactly how the flaw leads to a catastrophic, unrecoverable business failure.
And then they vanish. They systematically tear down their redirector infrastructure, clear their limited operational logs, securely wipe their memory implants, and leave the blue team chasing ghosts with absolutely no forensic artifacts left on the disk. Hashtag tag tag outro.
And that is the journey. We have fully outlined the transformation from a basic hunter who looks for isolated, single point of failure bugs into an elite operator who orchestrates advanced, multi-vector kill chains.
You now understand how to map the shadow IT via ASNs, break the API state machines using mass assignment, hide your C2 traffic using sauce profiling, pivot across complex cloud boundaries via graph theory, and extract the data completely invisibly.
The technical mechanics are absolutely vital, but the mindset is what truly separates the elite from the amateurs. It is about deeply understanding the interconnected, fragile nature of modern enterprise systems and ruthlessly exploiting the implicit trust between them.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought, something for you to mull over as you close this out.
Look at your own target's infrastructure right now. If you pulled one tiny thread, just one forgotten developer token buried in a dead GitHub repository, how fast could you unravel their entire multi-million-dollar zero-trust architecture?
The perimeter's a lie. Think like a ghost.
Keep your OPS seat tight and your payloads quiet. Goodbye.